All right, there we go. Let's get our Facebook groups in here. We'll see if both of them work. I don't know. I click on both, so we'll see. We got spinning wheels going 1 and 2. All right, welcome in. Welcome in. It is the last show of the week for us, the 22nd of February, and it's time for an episode of Broncos for Breakfast. I am Nick Kendell and joined by, as always, Scott Kennedy. Scott, man, you are working overtime. What's going on? How you doing? How's you got like a supply of lozenges or some tea? What's going on?
I actually have one I keep unwrapped right here in case I need it. So, but just the one yesterday. So the Mondays are the 3 pod days. That's the one where I'm glad we have Tuesdays off now.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
it's nice to kind of recover and get some other stuff done. Like I just finally finished logging all of my Senior Bowl videos. So I had done one team. This week I did the other team because if you're doing 11v11, you basically watch each play 6 times. So you go, okay, right tackle. And I've got a player, the VLC player gives you a shift back that drops back 3 seconds. So you watch the snap and you go, right tackle, no. Right guard, no. Center, yes, Kingsley Ebukam. Left guard, Tanner Bortonelli. Yes. And then you put them all in a spreadsheet. So I end up with like 1,000 lines of plays by the time I'm done. Now it's time to make all those edits. So it's time to get busy again. I took a little break, slowed down on the output because I was burned out a little bit, but now it's time to get all these things going coming out of Combine.
It'd almost be worth it to have like a little, college age intern AV kind of dude to cut
I
some of that
know.
up for you. It's
I'm
just
too I don't trust people enough for that.
that's true. That's
Made me
true.
kind of a poor manager, I guess. That's why I'm good by myself these days.
I'm gonna do it all. Well, let's say hello. I'm doing it all this week, is Scott,
I'll just
but
do it myself.
I feel that sometimes. We got Tyler Brooks coming in saying, "Morning, gang. Happy Thursday. Hope all is well with the baby Nick. Baby's doing well. Baby's doing well. God bless you and yours. Hope all is well with you and your family too, Scott. Thank you so much, Tyler. It's really nice of you to come in and say hello like that. We got Jeremy coming in saying, "Morning, boys. Interested to see how the narratives change with guys after measurements at the combine." I do think that the combine measurements and testing is always there's like a blip and then guys elevate and then sometimes fall back down. I think the guys who elevate and stay there, it's not as much the combine testing. It is people in the media rubbing elbows, crossing paths with actual NFL decision makers. And a few drinks here. There's not a lot of sleep that goes on in Indy during the combine. I'll put it out that way. That they're gonna have references crossed and be like, oh, these guys really do love Adisa Isaac, edge rusher from Penn State. He's actually somebody that a lot of teams are going to talk about late in the first round. No, just an example here, since Scott and I were just talking about him before the show today. So I think it's a lot of that, and it's verifying. Teams, I think it's, oh gosh, I can't think of who I've heard talk about this. As a longtime NFL scout, but they come in with their grades and they have expectations for what the measurements and testing are going to be. And if they fall within the ballpark of what they expect, then they'll keep their grade. It's not going to change much. You don't double grade, is what they say. Oh, Henry Ruggs is going to be fast. Okay, well, we don't grade him twice for being fast. But if you have somebody come in and they test way worse than you expected, okay, what's going on? We're going to go back to the tape. Or somebody who looked clunky that they test like a freak. It's like, okay, we're going back to the tape. What's going on here? So that's really more of the athletic measurements standing out in terms of the on the field testing drills.
And it's nice to hit the pro days just in case something's up.
Yeah.
Like you can actually, like you said, double verify. Okay, you ran a 4.38 at the combine, then you might not run again.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the standardization, or they might only run at their pro days. Well, there better been an injury in there. It makes me a little nervous when guys don't run at all.
Mm-hmm.
Get seen. You want these guys to pay you, then you've got to go through it. And I think the guys that have the meteoric rise at the combine are the defensive players. I think they're the ones that are more dependent on athleticism than skill. Again, this is a bigger, stronger, faster league. It's an athlete's game. This isn't baseball. It's not even basketball. I mean, you got to be a freak of an athlete to play basketball anyway. But it's not the skill that it takes to perfect those crafts and become a professional. You don't have guys that are say, "Oh, I was a tight end in college until my junior year," or a power forward, but I was only 6'5", so I went out for the football team, and here I am in the NFL. It doesn't work like that in other sports. but the defensive side of the ball is more athlete dependent than the offensive side of the ball. So you can see those guys really skyrocket, have a meteoric rise on the defensive side of the ball with a good combine.
I will add one comment on that. I agree with you 95%. There's one position on the offense that I think you do see the meteoric rises and from the testing and the measurements, and that is the tight end position. The tight end historically, there's the shout out to Kent Platt, who's going to be releasing the relative athletic scores soon. But as far as correlation between draft success and NFL success, there's a really high correlation between big testers working out at tight end.
Who was the 49ers guy that was so good from Maryland?
Vernon Davis.
Vernon Davis, yeah. He was in my first class, and he was my number one tight end coming out in my very first class of high school. So I think he was a class of 2003 and then went and did all those things. Yeah, I was waiting for you to say, I was like, if you say wide receiver, I'm gonna come back at that one.
No, it's tight end.
Just because wide receiver, everybody's fast. I mean, everybody's fast. You're either 6'4" running sub 4.6 or you're 6 foot running sub 4.4. There's too many fast guys for somebody to come in and run a 4.3 and be like, oh, I got to have him in the first round. No, there's lots of guys like that now.
Yeah, for the wide receiver, it's more of the enough factor versus like if you're up to the 50th percentile and better in terms of the speed and the size athleticism score, and your tape is good, trust the tape. If you go to the highest RAS guys at wide receiver in NFL history, obviously there's going to be a few freakazoids out there, your Julio's own Calvin Johnsons, but not as much correlation there with other positions. So it's the tight end spot for me. That's one that is out there that you want to look at as well. We got String Guy coming in saying good morning. After the combine starts, I'm looking forward to see how quarterbacks test 40 times on receivers, cornerbacks. One thing I'm enjoying that the NFL is starting to make public is the more important than the 40-yard dash is the 10-yard split of the 40-yard dash. How fast can you get up to 10 yards? Because that's 99% of football, right? It's how quick you can get there, as well as the jumps and the agilities, of course. But to me, the 40-yard is with the 10-yard dash being there, it's almost a little archaic. I'll take the 10-yard split every time. Now it's weird. You look back in history, Scott. I think we talked about this last year. The 40-yard dash time. Do you know what position has the strongest correlation to success and a good 40 time?
Oh, and a good 40 time?
Yes.
I'd probably say the athleticism translate the most rarely the bigger you are. Yeah. So I would say defensive tackle or offensive guard.
It's offensive tackle.
So big offensive lineman, because those guys, in order to run a 5 flat 40 at that size, you've got to be just an unbelievable athlete at that size. It's so rare. And if you give me a 6'6" guy with 35-inch arms running a 5 flat 40 that weighs 330 pounds, pretty good chance he's going to be a good offensive tackle.
Yeah. So I just, because I was like, oh, how often do you see an offensive lineman run 40 yards? Well, you look at the numbers based on how guys have done in the league. it's pretty interesting.
It means he can do everything else too, is the thing. And again, I haven't always worried too much about the 10-yard split because I think there's a pretty good correlation to the shuttle. So it's like if you see a good shuttle, you're going to see a good 10-yard split for most time because that's your burst. That's your get off. And if you can get off, you can usually change directions as well. So I like seeing it, but I'm still a big Elkhorn shuttle guy is really where I look for my athletes.
And I really love for the defensive side of the ball, specifically the front seven, they've added the hoop drill out there. So seeing how good those guys can bend around there and keep their momentum is always important and fun to see. But yeah, we're going to talk a little combine today. We got String Guy also coming in and says, I saw a mock that had Denver moving up to pick 7 to get ahead of Atlanta and take JJ McCarthy. Any thoughts on that possibility? Titans are currently picking at 7th. I think that's very possible. If the Broncos identify McCarthy as a guy they really like and they're calling and let's say they can't get up to 5, Chargers aren't interested in the package they have. The Giants are saying, nope, we're taking Malik Neighbors here. He's too good. We have him ranked as good as Marvin Harrison Jr. Nope. And then Atlanta's like, the Titans are like, well, we like Joe Alt, but we also like Olu Fashanu and Talise Fuaga and a bunch of these defensive guys. You want to give us a 2025 first and 12 to move up from 12 to 7? Okay, deal. It's probably what it will cost. I think that's a possibility, but it all comes down to the Broncos' evaluation on the guy and if teams are willing to play ball. And heck, there's a possibility that somebody moves up to 5 to get a JJ McCarthy or a Jaden Daniels. Scott, I've been kind of biting my tongue on that one. I don't think Daniels is in the same conversation as a Drake May or a Caleb Williams. So I'm expecting, I think there's a chance that the Patriots don't take a quarterback there. They take Marvin Harrison Jr. They have $75 million in cap space. That's a Justin Fields / Kirk Cousins watch team with all that cap space there, and then getting Marvin Harrison Jr. So we'll see. But I think that's certainly possible.
Yeah, we will see. You can talk me into that. I'd probably still go 1, 2, 3 at quarterback would be where I'm still leaning, but you could talk me into it. And again, I think, if he falls to 4, I think the Cardinals are open for business. Again, I think that's a team to watch. And String Guy, I'm gonna couple this with Jeremy's comment, because when I first saw this, it made me think. He says, 7 to get ahead of Atlanta and take JJ McCarthy. Any thoughts on the possibility? My initial thought is Atlanta's the team to watch here. They're desperate for a quarterback too. And if they like JJ McCarthy, you're going to have a hard time getting ahead of them. So I ask yourself, it's like, because they've got possibly 2 number 2 picks and a first that's ahead of you. And at least they've got a 2 and 2 threes to get ahead of you. So they can, anytime the Titans at 7, did you say?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The Titans are currently picking 7. There we go. It's right there in front of me. If the Titans are on the phone with the Broncos, the first thing the Titans are going to do is call the Falcons. Say, hey, listen, they're going to give me this to move up. I'm pretty sure they're going to want your quarterback. What do you think? Falcons say, okay, we want to do this. We want that guy. Or, no, we're good. Go ahead. That's not all right. But if they want JJ McCarthy, they're going to get hard. They're going to be hard to get in front of, which brings up the question, because this is what I think it would cost. Jeremy Sean says, would you rather have Drake May and trade the farm, or JJ McCarthy and next year's first? Because I think that's what it would cost you to get ahead of Atlanta. Mm-hmm. It would take 2 first-round picks to get ahead of the Falcons. The Falcons might say 8 and a second is as high as I'm going to go, or 8 and a second and a fifth. They're like, no, we're going to go with the 2 first, because we're on the phone with Sean Payton and says, hey, we've already gotten rid of all of our players, and it'll probably be a top 10 pick next year. So It's not just this year's pick. If we go into this draft Broncos country in a full rebuild, next year's pick becomes incredibly valuable. It could be a top 10 pick. If you get rid of Bowles, if you're cutting cap space with Simmons, cutting cap space with Sutton, you're looking at the possibility of another top 10 pick. And as Jeremy says, or Knicks at 12. Would you rather trade the farm for May? No. One, I think it would be astronomically, unbelievably, you probably can't do it, expensive. McCarthy is going to cost you 2 first-round picks. Probably not. To get up ahead of Atlanta if Atlanta wants him at 8, or Knicks at 12. I'm probably going Bo Nix at 12 here. You're not getting my 2025 first.
I want to know what the farm is for May in the end. And
it's 3 firsts and change, or 2 firsts and Surtain. And change.
I'm interested. I love Drake May, and I think he's a special combination of athleticism and arm talent and creativity as well. I mean, it's not Caleb Williams' level of creativity, but there's a few plays where May is, sky hooking a ball in the red zone. I mean, he's got a little bit of, not to this extent, but the red zone rushing ability that you see. You can do quarterback ISO power with him, and we know how much Peyton loves that with Taysom Hill. Well, now you actually have a quarterback who can run and do it. So I'm thinking at the end of the day, the quarterbacks are going to go 1 and 2, and the Bears and the Commanders are going to tell everybody to shove off because they're that caliber of quarterback prospects, and both those teams need them. But if there's even a chance at Drake May, for me, from what I've evaluated, I think he's really a special quarterback prospect. So I'd be on the phone at least seeing what it would cost.
Think of it from the other side, okay? Would I rather have Drake May, or would I rather have Sam Howell, number 12, a top 10 pick next year, and Pat Surtain?
I'd rather have Drake May.
Then you can't make that move because Sam Howell they're not going to make that move because they'd rather have Drake May.
Yeah. I'd rather
So
have.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're going to have to talk somebody out that needs a quarterback too.
Yep. Yep.
That's the problem of trying to get Drake May.
So I think in that situation, I could stomach. And the thing is about Nick's at 12, like it would stink if you took him at 12 and it didn't work. But you have a cost controlled quarterback who probably is at least going to come in and be the
Serviceable.
25th. It's going to be like probably at worst, it's Kenny Pickett, right? Like that's like, okay, the arm talent, the ability to drive the ball outside the numbers, the creativity, a little bit robotic in the play style, but he can be a point guard and we can Brock Purdy him to an extent. I think he's more talented than Brock Purdy is. But that's, I don't know. I think Drake May is a pretty damn good quarterback prospect. And if he was available, I would be interested. And I think he's probably a better quarterback prospect than anybody in last year's class. Obviously, we have hindsight with CJ Stroud, but as a prospect, I think May's better than anybody in last year's class. I think he's probably going to be better than anybody in next year's class as well. 2026, wait and see. I'm really intrigued with the quarterback at Tennessee. I know everybody's Arch Manning obsessed, but haven't seen him yet. Saw some stuff from that quarterback at Tennessee, a true freshman, Nico. I've some betting advice here. Early odds, I'd be curious what the Heisman odds for Nico are because, man, he's pretty fun. Troy coming in says, "Hey guys, do you think any
Real
teams?"
quick, and then we'll get to Troy. I know I showed Troy to get to your point. That the problem I have when you're talking about these players, that's the problem I have with the historical comps to trade value. Okay, so we look at what the Panthers. Oh, well, let's look at this is what the Bears got for the Panthers trade to trade out a number 1 last year. So this is what it'll cost. This is what it took to move from 12 to 3 with Trey Lance for the 49ers. So this is what it'll cost or thereabouts. No. When the Bears came out of that, it's because they didn't want a quarterback. Those teams want a quarterback. When the Bears came out of that, it was for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. Now, CJ Stroud was phenomenal, but he did not have near the Q rating that Drake May and Caleb Williams have coming in. So you're talking about not just if you're looking at historical value, use that as a starting point and then factor in the teams that you're trying to trade with also need a quarterback, and the quarterbacks that are available are better prospects. You're not getting them, dude.
Yeah, I know we're talking on hypotheticals. I don't see how we come out of the combine with Drake May not going to. But again, things change. I could be completely wrong. If you asked me, 3 years ago, I'm like, oh yeah, Justin Fields, the second best quarterback, should be number 2 overall. Somehow Zach Wilson and Trey Lance go higher. I guess in hindsight, Justin Fields probably should have been the second quarterback taken. Maybe not to the extent that he was the second overall player in that class, but interesting, no doubt. I think May's a hell of a player. No doubt. Troy Boer, thank you again for the big, generous super chat. Says, do you guys think teams would trade 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Surtain? I'm warming up to the idea. Have a great show. I think that probably some teams at the back end, they might be interested in 2 firsts and a 3rd rounder or 4th rounder. I mean, it's the Jalen Ramsey trade in the end, but I also think, I've talked about it on here, I think that the value of cornerback has decreased just a little bit over the last 3 to 4 years. You have way more too high safety shells. You have way more light boxes. So this right now where space is on defenses is the area between the safeties and linebackers and the area between the linebackers, and quarterbacks who can hit there are valuable, but they're protecting cornerbacks more, I think, with today's defense, with more zone coverage, with more too high safety shells. So I think the value of cornerbacks just dipped slightly. So maybe it's not as high as the Ramsey trade back then, but Ramsey was a malcontent. He had multiple issues with the Jags. They were motivated sellers, where the Broncos you have to make me an offer where it's kind of like the Commanders, right? Okay. What would you offer? Because I'm not interested, but I could be interested. So that's, I think that's what it would be. You're probably a year early still on the Surtain trade. But we talked about it on Monday's show. The data for cornerbacks after their 6th year in the league is not good as far as being elite difference makers. So Surtain's younger. He's a really good player, and he's technical and big, which those things don't go away. Athleticism can diminish, but your size and your technical aspects do not diminish as much. So he should have more staying power.
I want to qualify that statement because I hear people repeating it, that you're saying that and taking that and running with it. Okay. I think that statement has as much to do with their age as it does with the mileage in the NFL. Okay. Most cornerbacks that are playing at a high level aren't coming in at 20. Pat Surtain, I think.
Coming at 21.
Yeah. But again, I think the prime for a cornerback would probably be somewhere between 24 and 28, which is for most guys would be the 6th year in the league. Just like all physical, the closer you get to being 30 or on the wrong side of 30, your physical skills start to diminish, which is more important at cornerback than anywhere. So I think Pat Surtain has a longer, I mean, he's also better than, most corners.
Yeah.
He's, and I grew up with Darrell Green, who played at a high level till he was 38. There are outliers, but I think it's the closer you get to 30, which for most corners, even at the Pro Bowl level, is going to be 6-7 years there. So I think that's where that is. And when you've got a guy who's, again, Pat Surtain is younger than Michael Penix and Bo Nix coming into this. You want to try and get younger in the draft. Oh, we want to get younger at cornerback. Well, we should move Pat Surtain. That's insane. There's probably going to be 20 cornerbacks in this draft that are older than Pat Surtain. I know that's an exaggeration.
Yeah. The one pushback I would have is cornerback is historically, I think, the youngest position in the draft. I think it's
because
the average age.
Because it's a traits position, and traits manifest themselves a lot earlier than skill.
Yep.
So, I've got 4.3 speed and a 3.9 shuttle at 17 years old. I'll pick up some size and stuff. But again, I still think Pat Surtain is going to play at a Pro Bowl level for 10 years.
Yeah. Probably. It's the cornerback thing is so hard because one injury and you are done. It's very fickle in that that way. It's more so than
qualifier for a lot.
Yeah, I think it's more so for corner than other positions. And one thing, it's just to kind of drive that home, Scott, is that, and you know this well because you go down there and cover it. But what areas of the field typically you do not have? It's okay. We are really fun, and excited to see the trenches out here, and now we're getting to the cornerbacks out here. Okay, we might have 3 guys going in the top 100 at the cornerbacks at the Senior Bowl, because the guys who are the haves and the have-nots at that position, they come out underclassmen historically. So obviously you always have outliers there. Keon Mitchell is one this year, but that's the only pushback I'd have is that's a position that is
the idea with Surtain isn't necessarily about his age. It's about the money.
Yeah.
For me, like it's okay. His contract goes up exponentially. It goes up to $20 million in 2025. And then if you don't want him to hit that option, because that'd be a fully guaranteed contract with a full bore cap hit on a 1 year option. His 5th year option is a 1 year deal, basically fully guaranteed, full bore cap hit. Or I could sign him to an extension and I can spread that across and I can actually lower his cap hit. That said, the guaranteed money that he is going to get is going to be a record for cornerbacks.
For back 7 players. Even I think
it's going to be a record. So are you in your window where you can afford, you probably are, where I can say the next 4 years, starting in 2026, do I want an all-pro corner for the next 4 years? Because that's what it's going to cost you. And getting out from Russell Wilson's contract will afford you that option. Yes, I can spend that, especially if I have a rookie quarterback on a cost-control contract for 5 years.
And I've said this on here before. I think the Surtain conversation, if it nets you your quarterback, I think you have to do it. That's one where that's the kicker there. Your guy, then you can talk about it. If not, I think you're probably a year early overall. Let's say the Broncos are 0-6 at the trade deadline, and this team is just obvious dog water. Then maybe you're opening that window to move Surtain, and then next offseason, if you're starting 0-6 or whatever, and you finish like a top 5 pick, does it make sense for you to pay a corner when you have 3 years left, when the defense is probably going to be terrible up front still with that, if you're that bad? So a lot depends on how this season plays out. The really only, unless somebody pays, quarterback price for Surtain, then I'm interested, or Surtain nets you your quarterback. Otherwise, I can't imagine a scenario where it makes sense.
Yeah, it's kickstarting a rebuild. If I'm going full rebuild, I could use 5 players, not 1. And I could get 5 starters out of Pat Surtain.
I still think it's a year early though,
Mhm.
unless it gets you your guy, because quarterback is a different conversation. I'm gonna start Scott. I think with big boards going on.
The hard part that people have though is again your guy. If you hit it, yes, it's worth it,
Mhm.
but it's so unknown. You
I
know,
know.
it's like I'm trading this guy who I'm trading a 23-year-old, two-time Pro Bowl, all pro corner for a maybe. Are you crazy? I get that. I do.
Yeah.
But you gotta swing big. I
At
mean,
some point.
if you're gonna maximize your chances of hitting, you gotta swing big. You
Mhm.
know, yeah, I could drop down a bunt and they could throw it in the outfield and I could leg it into a triple and then they could fumble it around and I come around and score on it with a 7th round pick. That's the odds of that happening. If I'm gonna try and hit a home run, I gotta swing big.
Yep. It's tough because the hit rate is not awesome, but also if you don't hit, you don't have a seat at the table. So
You gotta
good
play,
luck.
right? It's not I
Good
can't
luck.
walk away from the table. Oh, it's
No.
too expensive for me. I gotta get out of here. No, you're gonna have to play. You're
Yep.
playing in 17 games next year.
Yep.
Who you going out there with?
It's interesting. We got Miguel San Steven. Good to see you, Miguel. He says, "Good morning, fellas. Been a while." It has. Says, "Hope you're doing well. I miss sleep, but other than that, I am doing pretty well and enjoying the conversation today. Having a lot of fun. I see Micah's in the house too. Good afternoon from Manchester. We love our across the sea folks there. Interesting photo of a goose. I'm not sure what's going on here, but good to see you. It's not a Canadian goose, so we're okay with that. Dave Glassman, Zach Powers in the house. Great to see you, Zach. Hope you're doing well. We got Eric saying these podcasts relax me before going to college. Thanks, y'all, and good morning. Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad it gives you a little bit of a relaxed feeling because Scott and I sometimes can be a little bit intense, but especially when we're
It's what
passionate
gets
about
me
something.
fired up. I'm pretty laid back, usually until we get going. Then I get going. These, like I've said before, these are like workouts for me. I get all excited.
Yeah, we do love the academic conversations, the philosophical team building stuff. It's pretty fun to get into. Rock Chalk Broncos, $5. Says, looking forward to the combine as we might hear some news about the Broncos regarding moves and get some clarity on what direction they're going. Yeah, that's honestly, I'm all about the prospects and the process of the draft. But as far as the Broncos are concerned, I think the big news we're going to get out of this week will be related to updates on veterans on the move or not on the move. There's an article by Spot Rack the other day that talked about like Broncos sound like they're probably going to move a lot of people because they're coming into cap hell. Mike Kliss has mentioned multiple times now in articles about the Broncos entering a season of cap hell. And fortunately, I didn't know this, Scott. There's like an option that the Broncos can they can either decline or defer, but it results in the dead cap hit being flipped. So my understanding before was that this year would be like a 35 million and then 2025 would be a 55 million. It's actually the Broncos can do some, if this is to be believed, and Spot Rack's pretty
I
reputable.
believe them. That's
That
what we did
Yep.
a whole show on that on Sunday night.
Yeah.
And I
So they
believe
can
them
do,
on that article. We did a
yeah.
whole show on that Thursday night, and this was the conclusion we came to. Go ahead.
Yeah, that it's reputable and the Broncos can take it more in the teeth in 2025 or 2024. Dead cap hit 50 million a dead cap, biggest ever for a single player, and then get I think it's only 30 or 25 to 35 in 2025. So that gives you your window open sooner, but that also means that you're up against it more this season, which means high priced guys, your DJ Joneses, your Garrett Bowleses, your Cortland Suttons, your Justin Simmons. I think every single one of those guys is going to be approached with a contract extension. And if they do not agree, Denver is going to be motivated sellers.
Yeah. Because you can knock those guys down to about 5 million in cap hit. You can save about 40 million in cap hit with extensions on those three guys.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you're already 22 in the hole, but it was something like 55 and 32 were the numbers. And this is the thing why I say about cap hell. Now, you were kind of in cap hell anyway. I mean, Russell Wilson was going to carry close to a $40 million cap hit this year. It's only going up a little bit by cutting him. It's not going up that much. You're getting rid of Russell Wilson does not change the fact whether you do with him or not doesn't change the fact that you're up against the salary cap.
Yeah.
And that's where some of those contracts were coming in. Plus, again, once I get about 12 or 13 back from Tim Patrick as well, I get about 10 back from DJ Jones. There's $60 million right there. If you take that cap hit at $55 million, This coming year, you actually save over $20 million in available cap space on Russell Wilson's contract in 2025. So cap hell is 1 year. It's this year, and I would bet a lot of money that that's the route they go, is take it in the teeth this year, rip the Band-Aid off, and you actually have more available money in 2025 than you would have if Russell Wilson was on your roster. That's not bad. That's not bad. That said, you still have to get your quarterback. And it's why it makes so much sense to get a rookie, because if I got a rookie on 3, I've got a quarterback. If I got a rookie on $3 million on a $3 million cap hit in 2025, and I'm saving $23 million, I'm plus 20 to the good at my quarterback position because I made this move early to move on from Russell Wilson. And that's why you make that move. Cap hell is 1 year, Broncos country. Don't let anybody tell you different.
And I would love to get a cap expert and bend their ear, and we'll find out really what the details are as it happens. But I'm pretty sure with the June 1st designation, you're even in more limited. You're not necessarily more in cap hell, but you're more limited because the savings that you get don't become available to you to spend until June 1st. And that's well after everything's happened. So really, it makes more sense to put it on the first year because you're not going to be able to spend anyway because the money coming from that contract. So that would be 1 year. It does mean that
qualify my statement.
Okay.
You're only in cap hill because of Russell Wilson's contract for 1 year. Now, what they decide to do with the rest of their money and other contracts, I don't know. You know, Sean Payton has a bad habit of extensions and deferred money and
void
having
years.
to, I don't know if it's all Sean Payton. The New Orleans Saints under Sean Payton had a bad habit of being $50 million in the hole before every season.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with them. It'll be interesting. I do not expect them to be big spenders this year with everything going on, though. Michael Ronquillo says, good morning, Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos. Go, Michael. We always appreciate you. He says, my new nickname is Michael Ronk Sunrise Ronquillo. I like it.
I think,
Michael,
man. I think here you're the Ronk. On my channel, you're Sunrise. I think that's the way we go. Otherwise, it gets a little wordy, brother. And then a nickname's supposed to be smaller. It's supposed to make things easier. So I think because if your name was Michael Ronk Sunrise Ronquillo, I think 1, you were Brazilian, and 2, that you needed a nickname.
It's a Game of Thrones name. The first of his name, the provider of Tucson. I don't know. But good to see you, Michael. We got Sean Burns in the house. Mr. Roush says he'd rather just bite the Bulls contract and draft a tackle early. The early pick should definitely not be, if not a quarterback or defensive line. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's got to be, probably will be quarterback or offensive tackle or defensive line if they sit there at 12. Rob Bucksbaum's in the house. Great to see you. Zach says Nick has paternity leave on Tuesdays. I don't go on official paternity leave until April, right before the draft. It lines up pretty well. So, yeah, that'll be something.
What are you doing? Taking comp time right now?
I'm going to work.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I'm at the work.
I got in trouble for that because I didn't take as much time off as my wife would have liked.
I'm doing what I can. Luckily, I have very supportive work and flexible work. Alex Barrio says, what scenario and type of a year do you guys see the Broncos being best case for the Broncos outside of a miracle season where we beat the Chiefs twice? I have a very hard time seeing the Broncos being, I think their ceiling next year is probably what the Steelers were this year. We're like, okay, you are being coached to some wins here and there. And it's like, okay, well, you look at the outside numbers, you're not really that good, but you're winning games because you're tough and you're winning in the margins, and you get a wild card spot and you get boat raced. I think that's probably best case scenario for this Broncos team. I've said it on here a few times, and you guys can disagree with me if you want, but when I look at this roster, I think that you're probably taking away a lot of talented key pieces. You're not going to really see the ramification of the Wilson contract until this season and next season as far as the draft picks. Like, you're missing those young up-and-coming players that should be making impacts right now from the picks 2 years ago, right? So it's like those up-and-coming guys aren't here to fill out your roster. So I expect a downturn there on the roster. I also think last season you had probably unsustainable injury luck. You were one of the top 5-7 teams in terms of snaps lost to starters due to injury. You had the 3rd healthiest offensive line, which is just, don't expect that again. That just doesn't happen. And also you had by far the most fumble recovery luck of any team in the NFL. And turnovers aren't necessarily lucky. They're chaotic, but they're not necessarily lucky, especially interceptions. Interceptions are more created than luck, but enforcing fumbles is more created than luck. But the actual act of falling on fumbles is a coin flip. And the Broncos called the right coin flip way more than any other time this season. So I don't expect that to happen again.
Alex, I think the best case scenario for the Broncos is you extend 3 key players in Garrett Bowles, Justin Simmons, Courtland Sutton, knocking your cap hit down so you can keep them just fine. You get internal replacements at center. Alex Forsythe plays at an adequate level. You either have Jarrett Stidham or a rookie quarterback playing at an average level, because one of the reasons why I don't think we can assume we're going to get as good a numbers from the quarterback position next year, despite Russell Wilson being gone. Well, Russell Wilson stunk. Russell Wilson didn't stink. He wasn't bad. He had a decent season. He was too expensive. I'd rather have $20 million in a new quarterback in 2025 than Russell Wilson. That's what it comes down to. Take care of those things. Hit on some of your draft picks. Have Drew Sanders, have Marvin Mims, have Riley Moss, take a first to second year leap, and I think 10 wins is about your ceiling. That's the best case for me.
I agree, and it's also really possible
Greg Dulcich getting healthy to help. You need some internal improvement, which you will get in some places just through osmosis, just through the natural progression of players getting better year to year. But you could have some regression in some places too.
Yeah, and again, Denver had a lot of injury luck last season, and maybe there is something to that. We won't really know about, it's because they changed their staff. Well, let's see. I want to see like 10 years of data before we can say that. I want to see a very broad sample size because just how noisy that tends to be year to year in the NFL. But yeah, I think next year is a rebuilding year. I think at the combine and after free agency and whatnot, we're going to have some more press conferences going on. And I know immediately after the season, we had Penner up there, we had Peyton up there talking about, I want to win right now too. We want to win now. But I think now that you are taking a step back and evaluating the roster, and especially with the way that Russell Wilson's dead cap hits, I'm thinking their tune might change a little bit about where the team is at. At least I'm hoping. I like the realism personally, but pie in the sky is good for some folks also. Just if you like that, this might not be the show for you.
I don't care what they say.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't care. Show me what happens over the next month in free agency with Garrett Bowles, Justin Simmons, and Courtland Sutton, and I'll know what your expectations are for this season.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's start to get into it here. There's more people obviously in here. Kathy's in here. Always love to see Lawrence Rivera, Chris Beeston, Keith Brugman's in the house too. Love you, Keith. Joey's in here. Just sign Uncle Rico and get it over with. Love that. Always appreciate you coming in. Combine. A week away from the NFL Combine, and I want to talk about a few guys that we want to. And yeah, Zach's talking about my love of Drake May. I'm sure you're too confident in your evaluation, Nick. Probably, but man, I really do like Drake May. He's a heck of a player, and I don't think he'll be available.
But again, we went through that, and I asked the question from the Commander's point of view, and
said no.
You said I wouldn't do it.
No,
that's the problem, because that's what it's going to cost in a normal year to try and move up from 12 to number 1, number 2. That's what it costs normally. Is the equivalent of 3 first-round picks and more, let alone trying to buy out a team that needs a quarterback. It'd be unprecedented.
Yep. Yeah, we got Oblivion Empire as well coming in. Always good to see you. He's found our Broncos show, Oblivion. We appreciate you coming in.
We talk a lot of quarterbacks here. We promised you. You.
Yeah, and Zach says Nick scanned over the linebacker part of his comment. He spelled my last name wrong, but no, the tight ends and linebackers, that's what the Hawkeyes do. So maybe. Also, Cal's in here. I love Cal. Guys standing out, guys we're excited to see. Scott, I'm going to set this one up for you on a tee because I want you to talk about this player. So we didn't talk about it beforehand, but somebody who Mel Kiper has said wouldn't be shocked if he skyrockets into the top 10 of the draft after the combine. Somebody that I think you were very impressed by down at the Senior Bowl. Somebody that could fill the void of that versatile inside-outside pass rusher that if he tests excellent at the 6'5", 290 pounds. Could be somebody that maybe ends up in the Broncos range and somebody we're talking about here, because athleticism matters at the defensive end, edge rusher spot more than any other position in NFL. And who is this?
I haven't heard you say his name, but I know who you're talking about, and it's Darius Robinson. He was inside, outside. He was right side, left side, and at 280 pounds, I don't need a Dafa Owe type of athleticism. I think he was over 280. He's like 286. I got it in front of me. Why don't you just look it up, Scott? Because by the time I find it, he was. Let's see what he was. I'll look it up in a second. He was inside, outside, right side, left side, so he can be a 3-down player, pass rush, hold an edge. He's got some technique that he needs to work on, but you see the burst, the strength, the tools are all there. I want to see what he grades, because he played at the Senior Bowl like a top 15 pick. Absolutely. Will he end up a top 15 pick? Probably not. He reminded me of the week that Jermaine Johnson had, really. Jermaine Johnson was phenomenal. I think he might be a little quicker, but Darius was significantly bigger. And I think Jermaine ended up sneaking into the second half of the first round and ended up being a really good player. Was it Jets took him?
Yep.
And I think he's started pretty well for the Jets. So Darius Robinson has a chance. He's already made himself a lot of money. He's got a chance to make himself even more, because it's an exponential curve. If he's got himself into the first round from the third round, he's made a lot of money. Now every step he takes is significantly more money, from 29 to 25, from 25 to 20. He's got a chance to make himself into a teens type of pick, I think.
Well, like I said, Mel Kiper mentioned that coming out of the combine, you could see Darius Robinson start to get some top 10 buzz, just because of the profile that he has. I don't think there are many 4-eye types in this class with the length and the inside-outside versatility. A name that I think you maybe mentioned, Scott. I definitely saw it in the ether, but Cam Jordan type, where he's like this big edge that can reduce
That's
inside.
The guy I've been saying. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the size and the power plays. And one thing about Robinson, I will say, is that he is an older player, and it took until this season for him to really come into his own. And there is pretty good historical precedent that, like, the guys that are the dudes at those spots tend to be the dudes when they're 20 years old in college. And it took until he was about 22. So that's why the guy that I'm going to talk about here, that I'm excited about, really intrigues me and excites me. And that's Byron Murphy, another defensive lineman out of Texas, had the highest pass rush win rate in college this last season, obviously playing next to the little bit more college profile guy, Q rating, as you like to say, Scott, and Tavondre Sweat. But Byron Murphy is going to be the NFL draft darling on that Texas defense, and probably that Texas team coming out of this season. I'm curious to see where he tests and where his length is. I'm hoping to see he's about 6'1", 305 to 310. And he came in this season at Texas only 20 years old. And I want to see what the testing is, the jumps, I want to see what he looks like with the bags, and I want to see the 10-yard split with him. But he is somebody, I think right now, he is very much a dark horse candidate for the Broncos at 12 overall. I think that he is a 3 technique that can play 1 technique as well. I think he has the frame that he can put on another 10 to 15 pounds, and he was dominant at Texas. I don't think he is a no doubt top 10 pick kind of guy. And I think that there's probably a couple of defensive tackles next season that I like more than Byron Murphy. Murphy doesn't always finish plays that well, but pressures matter so much for defensive linemen, especially defensive tackles. And he's taking on double teams. He's getting back there. They have him lined up at 1 technique a lot. So he's a phenomenal player. I'm really curious to see what he weighs like and what he tests like. So I really want to give a shout out and maybe turn Broncos country to Byron Murphy, who I think has a chance to be the first defensive player off the board when it's all said and done.
It's a big shout. That's a big shout for him. And Darius Robinson, just for the full numbers, he was 6'5" at the Senior Bowl. He was 6'5", 286. And I'm going to round up on these just a little bit. 35-inch arms, 10.5-inch hands, 85-inch wingspan. That's 7'1" on a wingspan.
Big boy.
Not only keeping guys out of your chest, that's blocking passing lanes. with a wingspan like that. He's an impressive physical specimen for sure.
Yeah, and we got Jeremy saying stealing your ideas. I mean, Scott and I, if you guys have stuck with us at all for any sort of time, you know that we are defensive line guys through and through. I'm gonna kick it off again here, Scott. Another guy that I'm interested to see coming out of the combine is tight end Theo Johnson out of Penn State. This is not a good tight end class this season, but Theo is big, and I loved the usage at Penn State for him. I think he's got the ability to be an F tight end or a Y tight end. He's got prototype size. And I think that the offensive scheme, Penn State fired their offensive coordinator this year, did not always utilize him the best. Also, because he's a tight end, tight ends essentially, if your name's not Travis Kelce, is there a single tight end who's like the main pivot person in a passing offense in the NFL? I can't think of any single one. Every single one's like a 1B. Kittle's great. Laporta's great.
Could be.
Mark Andrews great. But like, I would argue Kittle's as much option 3 as he is number 1 because they have McCaffrey.
San Francisco more than it has to do George Kittle. That's what I mean. I agree. Yep. Kittle could be.
Yeah, I agree.
Kyle Pitts could be.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll take London in that scenario, but London's great. That's more London than anything. But I think Theo Johnson has a chance to come in and really elevate himself in a really poor tight end class this season because he has the prototype size, and I think he's going to test really well. He moves really well. I'm not expecting a Noah Fant level of performance from him as far as a combine with the height, weight, speed, but I think Theo Johnson is somebody that you want to keep an eye on and could move himself in from mock draft simulators. I see him in the 4th round sometimes. I think he's going to have a chance to go in the top 60 when it's all said and done.
Yeah, he looked really good at the Senior Bowl too. He was another guy there, and these are the guys I know that I liked. It's one of those, okay, I like how they played. Now let's see how they perform. I want to see more. Safety, I thought that he's down, and when I think guys I want to watch at the combine, it's not so much for me of, okay, he's a first rounder. How much higher could he get in the first round? I mean, he's a first rounder. I really already like him. I start thinking guys like safety Tyke Smith out of Georgia, who comes in day 3 pick, played really well at the Senior Bowl. A little short for safety, but he's plenty big. He's 5'10", 206 pounds, and could come in. And I think that the Georgia guys have historically run really well at these things. So I think he could make some money. But, for teams looking for a safety, I put the Broncos in there. They could use some safety depth on a late day 2, early day 3 type pick. I'd keep an eye on Tyke Smith. One of the players that I know was talked about from Daniel Jeremiah that could have just blow the doors off at the combine, and you might know more about him, is Nate Wiggins, cornerback Clemson.
Yeah, he's really twitched up, good athlete, pretty slender. I am curious about his ability to handle guys in space as a tackler, but there was a play this last season. I don't remember. Maybe it was against Florida State where he chased a guy down 80 yards and then the wide receiver open field, and he chased him down and then forced a fumble, I think out of the back of the end zone or like on the 1 yard line. And he's just flying. He can absolutely fly. He's super twitched up. I do worry about the physicality and the size. He's just kind of a little bit skinny and slender to me. So there's going to be some tackling and questions about the catch point, but he is long and he is twitched up, and I'm expecting him to test really well. He'll probably end up being my 3rd cornerback. It's going to depend on what type of system you want to run as well. But if you're looking for more of a man cornerback out there, a mere ability guy, Wiggins might end up being team's number 2 cornerback on the board. But if you're looking for more zone ball skills coming downhill, physical, then you probably will like somebody like a Keon Mitchell or a Cooper DeJean more. But Wiggins is a great athlete. I'm expecting him to test really well, but definitely for more of a man match heavy scheme. Yep. Guy that I want to talk about here. There's a few more. I mean, it's 8:30, but we didn't start until we got 5-10 minutes left. But another name here that's going to stand out for me, somebody that I went to the tape and I had hoped for more, but you can see the athleticism and he just drips it. And that is, I'm going to say the name wrong, and I know Zach Powers is going to correct me on here, and I should be better about names, and I'm sorry. But that is Kingsley Suamataia. He is big, he is athletic, and he is going to test extremely well. He has 6'6", 330 pounds, and he has been registered at hitting 21.5 miles per hour as a freshman. Really, they're expecting him to run in the 4.8s, 4.9s, and I'm expecting just to show from the BYU offensive lineman here. I did not see that as much on tape. I thought he looked a little bit clunkier, but somebody that, I mean, we just talked about to start the show, offensive linemen that run fast tend to do pretty well. So Kingsley, if he tests as well as is suggested from him, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he jumps your Jordan Morgans on the back end of the first round, or maybe some of those centers that Daniel Jeremiah had going in the first, because somebody's going to bet on the athletic traits. And I also think Kingsley's got the ability, if he fails at tackle, I think he can be a pretty good guard as well. So that matters when you're talking about back into the first round. So looking out for Kingsley out there from BYU.
Do you think there's a typo on this one? Because the Senior Bowl has him at 6'4" and 3/8, 329.
I think that I was dealing with BYU's numbers, and what they put out was not true compared to what the actual numbers are.
Yeah, I think guard makes a little more sense for me. He was at tackle at Senior Bowl, and I wasn't overly impressed. And he still plays a little high for guard, so I'm not overly high on him as a guy coming in. There
But if
was
he tests
another
like a
Kingsley
freak,
there. There was
if he tests
another
like a
Kingsley there that I did like at center. And I can't pronounce his name either. It's either Iguakun or Iguakun from Florida. Kingsley did pretty well at center there as well. Again, I like day 3 guys to see what they might do. And there was a safety at Senior Bowl who just played hard-nosed, nasty. It was Evan Williams out of Oregon. Now, I don't know too much about him other than I want to know more watching him play in Senior Bowl. So he measured 5'11", 3/8, 202 pounds. So I want to see if he can get into, the into the 4.5 range. Check that shuttle. Again, you heard me say it before. Shuttle and Elcones for me are your athletes. So keep an eye on those. But he's a guy who made plays during a time where it's not always easy to do so at safety at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah. Well, fun. That's a fun name. I'll keep an eye out for him. I'm so biased because I love the defensive line so much. Somebody that I've been kind of in your ear about here over the last couple of weeks, Scott, and I expect he might end up being the singular best tester at edge coming out of the combine, and that is Chop Robinson out of Penn State. His get off and explosiveness and twitch are unbelievable. I know that I think I talked about him on here on, I think it was Wednesday, Scott, actually, when we talked about the Falcons, so it would have been yesterday. But people go back to the Penn State game against Michigan and be like, oh my gosh, they abandoned the pass after 2 drives. They don't trust J.J. McCarthy. It's like, I don't know. I didn't get that sense when I watched the game. I saw the right tackle for Michigan get beat. It reminded me Broncos country. I don't want to give you PTSD. It had shades of Khalil Mack's 5-sack game versus Michael Schofield, where it's like, this right tackle has absolutely no chance in hell right now. He is getting destroyed. So Chop Robinson, he's going to test great. He does not really know what he is totally doing just yet as far as a pass rush plan, because he's been able to win purely on explosiveness and athleticism. But he was unbelievable this season. They moved him around a bit, especially on third downs. I think he's a Nick Bonito mold kind of player, where I think early on, he's a really twitched up, bendy, explosive pass rusher who I have questions about the first and second down ability to set the edge. But I think he's longer than Bonito. I think he's a better athlete than Bonito. I think he's more springy than Bonito. I think he's going to test great, and I expect him to go somewhere in the 25 to 35 range. 20 to 35 range, maybe even higher if he tests freakishly. I know that the tape is not always there, especially the run defense and the pass rush plan, but teams are going to sell themselves on athletic testers at edge. So Chop Robinson's one that I am really curious to see, because the get off is probably second to none in this class.
If you're going to be a one-trick pony, sacking the quarterback's a pretty good trick to have. A couple of edges, again, going off lesser name guys, because you say Chop, but I rewind back 10 months, and you were saying, Penn State's got 3 guys that could be number 1 at their positions, and they've fallen off a little bit. Ola Fashanu, Kalen King, and Chop Robinson. Why has Chop Robinson fallen?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think it's probably because he's really pressure oriented, but he has not gotten the high amount of sacks. And I think that Penn State really didn't put themselves in a position to be in the be a talking point team this season. They failed in their big games. So Chop was good this season. He does have questions again on first and second down as a run stuffer, but the athleticism is undoubtedly there. I don't think he's a 5-tool edge rusher. So again, you have to have a specific plan for him, in my opinion, but he wins in a way that is going to matter. So I think Chop is somebody that you want to keep an eye out for in this one. Also, Scott, I had talked about him a bit, and you started the show today unprompted, but I know we talked about him already. But Isaac out of Penn State as well. I expect him to test awesome for Penn State. Also, he's probably somebody, I think we had a mock draft recently where we took him in the 3rd round. I think he's going to end up going in the top 50. If he tests as well, I mean, super long. If he tests as well as I think he can, he might even sneak into the back end of the 1st round. I think that like from pick 20 to pick 50, a lot of times it's very variable from team to team. So Adisa Isaac is one that I think is you want to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, he's almost 6'5", 250 pounds. So he'll play at 260, 265 by the time things are all said and done. The 1v1s are for show. They really are, and they're really exciting. They get my most views, and there are 2 guys, Big Ten guys on that team at Senior Bowl. That Adisa Isaac was one of them that didn't necessarily show in the 1v1s, but then once they went to 11v11s, they wreaked havoc on guys. Adisa Isaac out of Penn State was one of them. Jalen Harrell out of Michigan was another. Was one of those guys that when I put these together, starting today and putting those together, keep an eye on Jalen Harrell. He came in at 6'3.5", 251, so a little shorter, but a little thicker. Could be a good option. You start looking at edge on NFL mock draft database. Again, I don't know if everybody cares as much as we do, but Jalen Harrell is, I don't even find him, 204 on the NFL mock draft database. I get Jalen Harrell in the 7th, I'm doing backflips. Justin Abogi from Alabama is another one of those guys. I thought he did really well. He's 290-something pounds. So I'm interested to see how he does because he's ranked really low. And he came in at 6'4" and 1/8", 292 pounds. And again, could be one of those guys, he's only got 32 7/8 inch arms. He'll have to fall because he can't buckle his own belt. Yeah, well, then he goes in and just whips everybody's ass that you put in front of him. Those are the kind of guys that the Ravens, the Steelers, the Chiefs end up drafting at the back end of whatever round you passed them on, and then you wonder why they have so many good football players.
Yeah. Speaking of good football players, I had one more, Scott, that I did want to mention here, and that is Michigan defensive lineman Chris Jenkins, the son of longtime defensive tackle out of Carolina, Chris Jenkins. Different type of player. Chris Jenkins, the senior, the dad, was more of, the nose tackle, 330 pounds, really good plug compared to Julius Peppers on the outside. Chris Jenkins Jr., son at Michigan, a little bit more high cut, a little bit more 1 technique, 3 technique type, not the pure plug. And he had is supposed to test really great, Scott. He 307 pounds, apparently has 32 reps on 225 pounds on the bench, 760-pound combo. Really supposed to test great. 7'16" 3-cone, 4.33 shuttle, 9 foot
7'16" for an interior defensive lineman.
That's what they say at Michigan coming out.
Sold.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
I'm
vertical of 34 inches. So they expect him to test really well. I'm a little bit worried because the tape did not always show that level of player. In my opinion, I wonder if he's a little bit high cut. I'd love to get him a little bit more mass under his belt. I don't know if he necessarily has that bubble, but that you're looking at. God, talking about combine stuff or prospect stuff is so weird sometimes, but he doesn't really carry the sand in the pants that I had hoped for. But he is Yeah, I wish he's a little bit thicker in that regard with his profile, with his power profile, but a really good player. And one reason I think that he wasn't as prevalent this season is that Michigan has two other defensive tackles this upcoming season that are going to be in the conversation for 2025 as first round picks in Grant and Graham. So next year's defensive tackle class probably be better than this year's. And because of that rotation of interior defensive linemen, Jenkins didn't play a huge snap volume, but I'm not going to hold that against him too much. He's going to be a really good athletic tester, and there's a lot of good stuff on tape as well at Michigan. So I'm expecting him to go somewhere round 2 and end up being a really good player for 10 years in the league.
All right. Well, Michael Ranquillo is the sunset today. He's going to get us out of here. He says, great show today, Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos. I think that's probably about going to wrap it up for us, Nick.
It is. Yeah. Make sure you guys are following Scott and I on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendell MHH. Also follow us at Mile High Huddle. Follow us at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. And as the ticker says here underneath, please subscribe to our show, like our channel, and share on social media platforms. If there's any players that we did not get to today, please hit us up. There's obviously going to be more edges. And again, our Scott and I's, especially mine, but the bias kind of came through today because it was edge rusher, defensive tackle, edge rusher. I'm glad we could get Theo Johnson in there as well. But good to get the defensive guys a little bit of hype because it seems like the NFL draft cycle this year is offense, quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, Brock Bowers, wherever it is. We're going to have the Brock Bowers conversation at some point, Scott, as well, because that was really prevalent in Broncos country, but I'm not quite ready. I need to see the testing first before I'm there with him. But any final thoughts before we get out of here? As you take a sip of water.
No, just we'll for me the reactions to the combine are more impressive than the previews. So luckily we've got that coming up soon. But again, some of the guys to keep an eye on going in. I need a safety. We need a defensive lineman. Some guys we think that could shoot up the board. The problem is, as a fan, you don't want them to shoot up the board if you like them. Like, man, I wanted this guy in the 6 where he was supposed to be. Pull a hammy, do something, So it's a little counterintuitive when we start discussing, oh yeah, I'm really excited. He had a great day. Now we can't freaking get him where we wanted him.
Yeah, that's always the case, man, right? It was who was it, Adafe Owe a few years ago. There's always some guys who fly up, and I know we had Cooper DeJean conversation in here in the chat as well. I'm big, huge Cooper DeJean fan. I feel like I do a pretty good job putting the Bronco hat off when I come to evaluating this team, but I have a harder time sometimes with the Hawkeyes because I have good connections with some people in the organization there, and I hear who are the A+ people. It sounds like Cooper's an just unbelievable guy, and I don't think he's going to test at the combine. He broke his fibia in practice with 2 weeks to go in the regular season, and unfortunately,
someone said that in November that he wouldn't test at the combine. Nick,
probably not. You never know. You never know. But
wait for your pro day. Get another month.
That's exactly what it's going to be. You're going to get him at the pro day. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate because he would have tested unbelievably, and it might tank his draft stock a little bit because it's not standardized numbers. So like there's always an asterisk there a little bit if it's pro day stuff. But he is probably going to be at the pro day. So we'll
there
see.
Will be 32 teams there watching him. And if he puts on a show, it will still translate.
Yep.
Now it won't matter. They'll know. It's like, okay, well, maybe this was it. And plus that track is so freaking fast at Indy these days.
They changed it. Yep. They changed it.
It's like, why wouldn't you want to run there for God's sake? So Bonneville Salt Flats.
Yep. They also, because they changed all the drills to night, there's something physiological that in the morning time, people aren't as like, you're not at your physical peak at that point. Cause they were running at like, 8 a.m. They'd been up since like 3 because they had the medicals beforehand. Now it's pushed to night and the numbers have exploded on top of the track being faster. So even then you don't have really the historical standardization from a like clinical trials perspective, which is my line of work. But Scott, no final thoughts. We got to get on out of here. All good.
Nope. Ready to go. Thanks for everybody for being here. Want to give a shout out to our super chat superstars today. Troy, Miguel came in, Rock Chalk, and Michael Ranquillo several times. So thank you for helping to support the show and what we do here at MHH.
Yeah, thank you guys so
I'll
much.
be back on tonight with Zach, so we'll see what we're going to talk about. We probably won't get quite as technical. I'll hand it off to Zach. You guys have heard enough from me, so I'll be filling in tonight on the MHH pod.
That'll be fun. That'll be great. And you guys have a great one. Yeah, Scott does backflips for breakfast. Now that's getting ready for the combine. Don't throw out that back though. We got to get that bike ride in.
I don't
today,
do backflips. I don't go backwards.
No.
I'm bad in reverse. I've done one backflip in my life off a diving board just to prove I could do it.
That was
just
enough
to say I can do this. I do not go in reverse. In fact, my dad, I actually have a pilot's license. My dad said if they had reverse in airplanes, you never would have made it.
You sound like Broncos former 3rd round pick Brendan Langley, who the Broncos drafted to play cornerback. He switched from wide receiver to cornerback, and then like 3 years in or 2 years in, he was so terrible at cornerback. He's like, I actually hate going backwards. Tried him at wide receiver, and terrible pick in hindsight. He couldn't do it. But you drafted a guy who couldn't go backwards to play cornerback. That might be Scott. I don't know what's going on. Wide receiver for sure. Not offensive line. You're attacking. You're going forward. I appreciate it. Everyone attack the day. Have a good one. Choose kindness and compassion. We'll see you later. Go Broncos.